Hi everybody, this is Judi at Judi in the Kitchen. Today we're going to talk onions 101, the basics. But before I get into that, I want to ask you if you've been following along with these 101 videos, if they are meeting your needs. I would like to know that, so please give me some comments below if there's things that you need to know that I'm not addressing, or if this is too much. Just let me know, because I have plans on doing a whole lot of the 101 videos in addition to the ones that you asked me for, which I'm still working on. But I need to know if these are meeting your needs, because I'm doing this for you. I put a lot of time and effort into the research involved for each of these videos, so I need to know if they are meeting your needs. So please give me a thumbs up, or send some comments below so I know if you need me to improve them in some way. I'll be glad to make some changes, okay? So, now, as always, I've got some notes in front of me. This is a long one because we're talking about onions and the onion family. And there's a lot to be said about them. So I have notes in front of me, but don't worry about taking notes yourself, because these notes will be made available to you. I'll have a link to them below in the description box. They're way too long for me to put directly in the box itself, but you'll have a link to my blog where you can copy them out and use them as you need to. Now, about onions. What we call an onion is also called a bulb onion or a common onion. So it goes by a couple different names. As with some other things that we've covered, it's a member of the allium family, so it's closely related to garlic and leeks and chives and other types of vegetables that are in that same family. Onions are grown around the world, and they're commonly used in cooking as a vegetable or part of a savory dish. But it's also used raw to flavor sandwiches, salads, pickles, chutneys, you name it. It's used in a whole variety of ways. They provide flavor, color, texture to a wide array of foods. Now, there are many varieties of onions, including scallions, spring onions, which are actually two different things, Vidalia onions, ramps, yellow onions, white, red onions, shallots, and pearl onions, cipollini onions, which is a new one to me, and leeks. And each type of onion will vary in its flavor, from mild to sweet to very strong. Now, in the notes here, I have actually two links to websites that show pictures of different types of onions, and they talk about them as well. So I don't have a variety of all the onions here to show. So my suggestion is, if you want to see, let's say, what a cipollini onion is, go to these websites and you'll see what they are, and they'll talk about them a little bit, so you can learn a lot about that. Now, the average American eats about 20 pounds of onions. To gain a newfound appreciation for these things, just try preparing a dish that you commonly use onions in. Try preparing it without the onion. Oh boy, you'll suddenly have a real deep appreciation for this little pungent bulb that can range in flavor from very, very pungent to very sweet, as in caramelize. Now, a fun fact for you: according to the Guinness Book of World Records, the largest onion recorded weighed 10 pounds, 14 ounces. It was grown in England. I would love to have seen that. Nutrition tidbits. Onions are high in vitamin C, and they're a good source of fiber and folic acid, and they contain an array of other nutrients as well. Onions also have what's called quercetin. It's an important antioxidant and anti-inflammatory flavonoid that helps to protect us against heart disease and even some cancers. Onions have been found to help control blood sugar, boost bone density, have antibacterial properties, and boost digestive health with their fiber content. So in addition to flavor, they also add health properties to the foods that we incorporate them in, so this is a good thing. Now, how to choose onions. You want the bulbs to be firm and dry. You can hear that this is dry. The papery skin there is kind of brittle. Avoid those with cuts or bruises or blemishes, or if they're soft or have wet spots in them. You don't want those. Those are on the older side, and they may be aging as well. And you also want ones, the root end is down here, the neck end is up this way. You want one with a tight appearing neck end to it, and it should also be dry on the outside, okay? How to store onions. Onions keep best when they're stored at room temperature in a single layer or hung in a mesh bag in a cool, dry, dark, well-ventilated area. The cooler the temperature, the better. Of course, it needs to be above 32, but you can even store them down to 35 degrees if you want to. Don't store them in a plastic bag because that lack of air will allow moisture to accumulate in the bag and will cause them to spoil. Now, we have often heard that you don't store onions near potatoes. Onions can draw moisture from other vegetables that are stored nearby. So we don't store them near potatoes because potatoes release moisture and gases that can cause the onions to spoil. So keep them away from each other. An interesting note here is that freshly harvested onions do taste sweeter than those that have been stored longer throughout the winter months. So if you notice, sometimes you go to eat a slice of onion with your salad, sometimes it tastes sweeter than other times. Very likely be the onions that are stronger in flavor are possibly older. It could depend upon the variety, but they could also be older as well. How to preserve onions? Well, we can easily freeze them. These things are beautiful to freeze because all you have to do is peel them and cut them into whatever size you want, put them in a freezer bag, label them, and throw them in the freezer. You do not need to blanch them. Now, when you go to use onions that have been frozen, don't plan on using them like you would a raw onion because the texture is going to be different when it thaws out. And usually you could just use a frozen onion in any dish that calls for cooked onions, just like they are frozen, little to no thawing whatsoever. So they're really a convenient food to have around. You can dehydrate onions if you want to. Follow the instructions that came with your dehydrator. Like with garlic, these are likely to produce quite a bit of odor depending upon the onion that you're using. So you might want to move that dehydrator to the garage or on a porch if you're going to be drying onions. Okay. Raw versus cooked. Onions can be eaten both ways, raw and cooked as well. Raw, we use onions in sandwiches, salads, relishes, pickles, salsa, and more. And in the notes here, I have some interesting things that I found, creative uses for onions. And the instructions are here in the notes. How to use an onion to repel insects or to soothe insect bites. How to soothe a sore throat. Now that one, it would take a strong stomach to me to do what they suggest on that. You'll have to read the notes to see what I'm talking about. You can soothe the pain of burns with an onion, and you can even remove splinters with an onion. All of these instructions are in the notes, and they're very interesting things to me. You can even make your own dye with onion skins, and the instructions are in there as well. Cooked onions are used in an almost endless array of types of dishes, from soups to jams and even cakes. I have even seen recipes with onions in cakes. Obviously, that would be like a caramelized onion. So cooking onions does reduce that pungency that's in there, and depending on the type of onion and how it's cooked, the flavor can be anywhere from very pungent to very mellow and literally sweet, as like when they're caramelized. Fresh versus frozen versus canned. Fresh onions are going to be your most versatile because you can use them in any way you need to whatsoever. Frozen onions, I already mentioned, can be used in cooked dishes with no issue, little effort whatsoever. You would not use frozen onions like they were raw because the texture will be different when they thaw out. Onions can also be canned or jarred, and they have been pickled, French fried, or packed in some sort of a brine solution. And those can be used for any dish calling for onions, but the flavors may be less intense than if you used a raw onion. How to prepare onions? Well, cutting fresh onions does tend to cause a sting at times, depending upon the onion, in the eyes when they're cut. And so when they are cut, they release gases that mix with the fluids in your eyes and create a stinging type of chemical in your eyes. So one way to help reduce that, a couple ways here, you could cut an onion under running water or in a bowl full of water. Refrigerating it shortly before you want to use it can also help to reduce the release of those compounds. Another thing that is said is that if you leave the root end intact when you're slicing it, you'll have less of that issue with the burning eyes, because a lot of the compounds that cause that stinging in your eyes are located more toward the root end of the bulb. So if you leave that intact, you're not going to release those compounds as readily. Now, you'll see on television and on YouTube chefs cutting onions in specific ways so that you can get uniform pieces, so that when they brown and saute or whatever, they're going to cook at about the same rate. I have 2 links here in the notes on actually how to do that, so you can watch a video over and over and over again if you want to learn how the professional chefs cut onions for that purpose. Cooking and serving methods. Onions can be used with foods from savory to sweet. They can be grilled, sauteed, stir-fried, steamed, added to soups, stews, casseroles, and sauces, roasted, caramelized, sweated, browned, battered, fried, pickled, added to sauces and relishes, added raw to salads and sandwiches, and more. It's only limited to your imagination on what you can do with an onion. When prepared in certain ways, specifically roasted or caramelized, they can be delicious side dishes in themselves and served with a whole array of types of different meals. But more often we add them to other foods so that they enhance the flavor of whatever dish we're preparing. I have a link in the notes at this point to a website that shows specifically how to fry, sweat, brown, caramelize, saute, and roast onions. I have a lot of resources here for you in these notes. Herbs and spices that go well with onions. I have a relatively short list here because onions go with so many things it would be almost impossible for me to add them all. But specifically, I did write out paprika, celery, salt and pepper, of course, coriander, basil, garlic, marjoram, sage, oregano, tarragon, thyme, parsley, rosemary, dill, and mint. Obviously, a small partial list. And the same thing goes with the foods that go well with onions. It'd be impossible for me to include all the foods that onions will go with, but a short list would be bacon, bread, cheese, milk and cream, garlic, oil, mushrooms, beef, beets, cucumbers, and potatoes. And anyway, any one of us could add a lot more to that simple list. Now I have a number of links here to places, websites that have recipes using onions. One source has 50 onion recipes, another one has 21 recipes that make onions the star of the meal. Another one, how to make caramelized onions, actually a couple there. Another one on roasting onions. I have a link to recipes using onions from the National Onion Association's onion recipe website. Another one has 14 ways to use a bag of onions. Another one has 26 ways to use up onions. And another website has over 100 recipes using onions. So if you don't find a recipe there that sounds intriguing to you, I guess you just haven't looked, because there's so many here that surely you can find some way to use some of the onions you've got and find something different than what you're already doing. And as always, following that, I have a lot of resources as well. So I do hope that this has helped you out and answered some questions that you have about onions and what to do with them and how to prepare them. If there's a question that you've got, something that I have not addressed, please do let me know in the comments section below. I'll be glad to help you out if I possibly can. This is Judy at Judy in the Kitchen. Have a great day.